Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Kelly?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if this is the first podcast since the last podcast?
Well, I did some figuring this morning because I figured I'd have to answer that question, and it is.
You did some ciphering?
I did a lot of ciphering.
Where were you?
My head hurts now.
Yeah, just a pounding.
Yeah.
Where were you working today?
I was at home today.
How come?
My mother passed away last night.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you asked the question,
I'm glad.
We're transparent here, but
absolutely. Accuracy of no. Okay, so you're having kind of a melancholy day then.
Oh, I'm having a real melancholy day. In fact, I'm probably going to take off the next 2 days from microtrains,
right,
and deal with my feelings and all that stuff. And then,
for sure,
I'm going to be real happy on Thursday.
Yeah,
I was happy on Thursday.
Yeah,
because it's always next week. It's always next week.
Exactly, because Thursday we'll be together.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I can't think of a better place for you to be on such a sad occasion than right here at the old AML studios.
I wouldn't miss it.
In downtown Busted Knuckle, Kentucky.
I wouldn't miss it.
I wouldn't miss I'd miss having you here. Tell us your favorite story about your mom.
Favorite story. I had it when I was 15. I had osteomyelitis in my right leg, which is basically a bone infection, and they admitted me to the hospital. And so my mother took me to the hospital, and we went in and we sat down at the admitting office, I guess it is, and the lady that was checking me in asked where my mother was. And I said, sitting next to me, and she thought my mother was my girlfriend.
Wow.
Yeah. Mom was a very beautiful woman, and she was 92. And
when you were at the hospital?
Well,
I see what you mean.
15. Yes. 50, almost 50 years ago. But
wow.
So that's why when I'm, especially at the park, when somebody comes up to me and says, well, how old are you? And I say, I'm 70. You can't be 70. I go, no, I'm 70.
Yeah, you look 70. You look like 75 to me, 78.
I feel like I'm 80 now. God. Getting up and down doing track is not an easy bit.
Well, what, the 7.5-inch gauge, you mean?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to, we're here with our buddy, The Wiz, Rich The Wiz Wisniewski.
I was watching his travels.
Hi, everybody. Bruce, I'm very sorry to hear about your passing your mom. My condolences.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I can't think of a better place for you to be, Bruce.
I know.
Than right here with us.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of a softie, you know.
Yeah, I got it. Well, actually, I'm a softie on the outside, but if you get on my wrong side, watch out. I haven't been there in a long time.
I've been trying to do that for 8 years. Get on your wrong side.
Nah.
Are you what size? What sides? How many sides do you have here? Are you like octagonal?
Am I octagonal?
How many?
Maybe a square.
How many sides is an octagon? How many sides is it?
8. Yeah.
All right. I'm on your. I'm working my way around. I'm only on your 5th side right now.
You might have to go to a decagon.
Okay. So, do you remember Bruce and Rich? Do you guys? Rich, you didn't come with us on the bus tour on Tomstock, did you?
That's correct. I did not.
Why not?
I was at work.
Oh. Why didn't you take the day off?
I had to allocate my day off resources as someone who still works.
Dave wouldn't let him.
And I really wanted to be on that the trip on the Bud cars,
right?
And so that was the day I chose to take off.
Yeah, and that was a great presentation that you had to hand out for everybody.
Well, thank you.
Cool. It really helped on the journey.
It was a fun project.
Are you going to do it again next year?
Sure.
Are you coming next year to Tom? It's Tom Stock 2024, the Queso Cowboys birthday roundup.
I assume I will be, unless there's some, schedule conflict.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want to have a schedule conflict if we can avoid that. But we'll see what happens. So, anyways, you missed the bus. We got to tour Ken McCorry's layout.
Wow.
It's an impressive place.
It really is. And was that the first time you'd ever been there, Kelly?
That was the third time.
The third time?
The third time. The first time I went was with the Steel Modelers. It wasn't this. Yeah, it was Steel Modelers group. It had just started. And Mike Rabbit, and let's see who else was involved in that. I got to remember. John, I can't remember his last name, but we went there, and if my jaw was any long, if it dropped any farther, it would have hit the floor. I mean, coming up those stairs and seeing the steel mill and everything, and then looking to the left and seeing the scenic hillside, and the trains are running. It was just like unbelievable.
Do you remember how many years ago that would have been?
That would have been when they were at Valley Forge, 2000. I want to say 2004. I think it was.
All right. Well, 2004 it is.
I think that it's so far back there, but yeah, it had to be then because Yep.
The first Bruce. This is of course an interview, an episode, so it's on the Monday. It's being broadcast on Monday, and the first question. What are you laughing at?
Because I know we've been down this road before. Go on. I'm ready.
The first question I'm going to ask him is if he has any Rapido trains.
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
I got it.
I was making a video with Jeremy Fleming the other day, the Rapido.
Oh yeah,
Rapido video guy, and I was hoping to get a starring role, but I think I was a bit player.
Your part went on the floor, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know. We haven't heard the final thing yet. But basically, I was supposed to play a stooge, and I did pretty good.
Oh yeah, that's typecasting.
You guys can leave anytime. Rich, all right. You know what? Let's get our guest in here.
Yeah.
And Rich, can you go get him?
Sure. Just give me a second.
Just watch your head. Watch your head going down the stairs.
Hello, Ken. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you got me.
It's time for your interview, Ken. Come on and
Okay.
join us.
Here I come.
It's time, Ken.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Lionel.
Hey, Ken.
Hey, how you doing?
Have you
Rich?
ever heard of
Ken?
our podcast?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Okay.
So,
This would be an ideal thing. You know what you and I have in common more than anything else in model railroading?
what is that?
We both like to go to bed late and get up late.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's now since I've been retired, I discovered how much of a night owl I really am. So,
When did
number
you
of times I've left the barn and I look and said, "Oh, the sun's starting to come up."
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
So,
That's the perfect time to go to bed.
yes, it is.
How long have you been retired?
I retired early. I retired at the age of 47. Family business, where I was in the oil business. I'm a third generation oil man, and had some other cousins in the business that wanted to take the business a different way. And at that time, I was the nuts and bolts person in the family. I mean, we had a fleet of 58 trucks. I managed the fleet. I drove it. I ordered them. I painted them. Worked on them. They were basically office people, but I was the nuts and bolts of the family, the third generation.
Right.
And I had no interest in what they wanted to do. And they made me 3 offers, and I took the third offer and did consulting for a number of years. When they wanted to buy a truck, I would spec the truck out and such out. But I retired at the end of 95. And the interesting thing is the first week of 96, we had a giant snowstorm down here. and about 30 inches of snow. Normally, I would have been down in the garage putting chains on trucks, and
Right.
I sat up and I looked outside and I said, I don't have to go to work. So
Your plan was working perfectly.
yeah, I didn't realize it at the time. So, but that's why I get a lot done upstairs, because I have other things to maintain around here. But the nice thing, I can sort of do upstairs what I want to do until I get tired of doing it. So
Well, exactly, yeah. And when did you actually start? So, for anybody that's not familiar, how would we introduce this particular railroad, Rich?
Well, it's it's based on the I'll say the Pennsylvania Railroad's Buffalo line from Harrisburg to Buffalo, but it's a lot more than that. It's a railroad that is a model railroad that includes more than a dozen different branch lines and connecting railroads. So it's a real rail system, not just a single model railroad, in my view.
And so, when did you start working on this layout, Ken?
Well, the barn that it is in, that was built in 1991, and I designed the building. The building back then, the original building, was a 32 by 80 foot barn, and the first floor was a garage area, workshop, crew lounge, and then the second floor was basically one big giant open space inside, 31 by 79, with one set of stairs coming up. And, no issues as far as plumbing or anything else up there. It was just a big open space. And so I basically sat down, and I'm not a computer guy, so I use graph paper and pencils and erasers and a ruler. And I designed the basic bench work before the barn was actually finished. And set it up and got it basically done about 2 months. And the vast majority of the bench work that I designed is still up there and still in service.
So the bench work you did in 2 months?
No, I did the design.
The design in about 2 months.
And and then what I did was, when I ordered I was the general contractor for building the barn.
Right.
And one nice thing about being in the oil business at that time was that a lot of our customers, I had people who were plumbers, electricians, carpenters, people who are masons. So I knew them, they knew me. So I was basically the general contractor. So I designed the barn, took a set of architects for them to make sure that everything was the way it should be. And what I also did when I ordered the lumber for the barn, I sort of took a guess on how much plywood I would use. The railroad is built entirely out of 3/4 and 1/2 inch plywood.
Whoa.
There is not one stick of dimensional 1x2, 2x4 in the railroad. And
Wow.
and the nice thing is when they delivered the lumber for the barn, on the back of the triaxle flatbed, there was 2 pallets of 3/4 and 2 pallets of 1/2 inch, which they took a crane and put it in the where the garage area is, and that was the railroad.
How did you get it to the second floor?
Well, what I did originally was the garage down here. We had a table saw, a chop saw, had a shopsmith. We had that set up, and we took a good friend of mine, Al Renard. I gave him the benchwork plans that I had drawn up, and then he took them and broke them all down in as far as dimensions. And there's probably say like a normal 4x8 foot section of benchwork. There's probably about 15 or 20 of them. So the nice thing is, we get every piece of lumber had a code on it. Started with A, and went from A, I think, down to T, and then we went to double A to double T, and we actually got as far as 4 A's, I think, about 4 M's.
Wow.
And so the idea is we basically ripped most of the plywood to 3-inch widths, 8 feet long. And then we started cutting them up and to length. All the joints were dadoed, so those were all cut. We would mark it, put it aside, mark the print off, and go make stuff. So we had a bunch of guys. Being a late night person, I would set everything up. They would show up early, about 7:30 in the morning. We call them the termites. And they would basically just start cutting lumber. Then I would show up about 10 or 11 when I woke up. And we just basically, get the benchwork built. And then as we got the kits built, we took the kits upstairs and placed them around the room where they were going to be, and then assembled them upstairs and put them in place.
The kits? You're losing me a little bit. What do you mean by the kits?
Yeah. Well, we actually, if you take a 4x8, you got two pieces that are basically 8 feet long, 3-inch quarter. You got two on the side that are basically, enough for 4 foot width. A couple pieces in the middle, and you had them all marked. Everything was datoed, so you took them all upstairs, and it was just a bunch of bench work. You said, okay, I need 2 of these, and 4 of these. You'd grab them out of the pile, put them up in the air. We had air nailers, and we would basically glue and air nail all the bench work pieces together.
Wow.
And just put it, send them over where it had marked on what the bench work number was, and set it in its place. So the upper level, it was basically built as a 2-level layout, and it's cantilevered off of the upper floor. The stud walls are all 2x6 for extra insulation, and the upper level is actually tied right into the stud walls. And when I built the original, when I had the dimensions, took them to the architects, basically I had a 32 by 80 foot box. And they said, well, you're going to have to put some 1/2-inch plywood 10 foot out on all the corners as a stiffener, because otherwise this thing, it could just fall over like a stack of cards. And I said, I know why you're doing that, but I don't want to do it that way. We'll build some benchwork and you can take a look at it. So we put a benchwork in on one end, and they visited and said, oh, that's better than the plywood. So it actually works as the upper level and also a building stiffener.
It works as a building snip. It's the
stiffener. Yeah.
The benchwork works as a building stiffener.
Yes, it does. Yeah, because it goes around, all 4 walls of the building through the corners. In some places, it's 4 feet wide. A lot of places, some places it's 2 feet wide. Some it's 3, depending on what I wanted to build. And it hasn't. The barn has survived. Basically now almost over 32 years. The benchwork hasn't moved at all. So, the nice thing with cantilevering, basically, if we had a 4-foot cantilever, the horizontal piece would be 4 foot, and then the vertical piece would be 4 feet, and then we have an 18-inch radius on the 3-inch thick side, and that's what tied into the studs. And the nice thing is it would support me in the low 200s at that point in time. I could get up the benchwork and it wouldn't go anywhere. So,
did anybody get any of that?
Yes, I did.
Oh, I
got it.
You got it?
Yes, I got it.
I understood what he was saying about cantilevering the benchwork off the studs. Right. Like you must have cut. Did you cut? Like what were you using for the dimensional lumber? Like I know it was plywood, but was it the 1/2-inch or the
3/4? All the benchwork itself is 3/4. We used 1/2-inch ply and homosode for the sub road bed.
Oh, okay.
So, yep.
And have you had any trouble with 1/2-inch? Has it worked out okay?
It's been fine. So it's glued down. We actually used epoxy nails and a hammer, which was an interesting piece to do, because of an epoxy nail, as you're hammering it in, the heat of it going through the wood melts the epoxy. And if you happen to stop and go to hit it again, there's a lot of nails up there that have been cut off or driven in with the heads cut off. Later on, we ended up with an air nailer, which made things much easier. So,
so where did you get the idea for this plan? Like, what was it? What was the what's the seed? What the seed? What do you call it when? What's the
impetus?
Impetus or the seed? What was the seed, or what drove you to this plan? Like, had you had a lot of experience operating other layouts, or like what? How did you come up with this plan?
Oh, okay. You mean the benchwork plan or the layout plan?
Well, the layout plan. The layout plan.
Okay. The layout plan. Well, before I moved up here, I lived in a townhouse about 15 miles east of here.
Right.
and that had a 16 by 32 foot basement. So we put stud walls in, and that benchwork was cantilevered in a different manner, which we discovered really wasn't as strong as we liked. We actually put sockets on the 2x4 vertical studs, and then the benchwork pieces, which were still 3-inch, 3/4 ply, actually had a piece that stuck out the back and would slide into the socket. And but we discovered that was not strong enough to support. Usually when somebody needed to get up from the aisle and they grabbed the benchwork to do a pull up with, that's when you discovered the strength of things. So, but that's the first one I ever built of all plywood. And
what gave you the idea of going all plywood? Because that's when you built the first layout, that was pretty hip to be using all plywood.
Oh yeah, that was 1981 when I built the first one out of plywood.
Yeah. So what gave you that idea?
Well, a 3/4 inch piece of plywood, and we used AC plywood back then. One side's a exterior,
right?
Is basically about 3 times stronger than a 1x3.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the strength is there. And the other thing too is it depends where you around here back then we had an 84 lumber. I had a Heckinger's. There wasn't a Home Depot around here then. I don't think there was a Lowe's either. But you'd go in and I need to buy some 1x3s, and you'd sit there and you'd be going through the pile, and there would be a bigger pile of the ones that twisted and were bent and had knots. And I said, what if we just cut some plywood and ripped it 3 inches wide? It's basically it's a poor man's 1x3. And back then plywood it wasn't that cheap, but it was actually cheaper than 1x4s and 1x3s. So even the legs upstairs, we built the legs for the lower level, and it's they're basically a T-leg, and they're 2 pieces of 3-inch plywood, and one of them we just ran a dado from top to bottom, and then we just put the other piece in to make a T-leg, and then we cut them long, and then we put them in. We made like 50 or 60 legs, and then What
did you say? You ran it from top to bottom?
Yeah, we ran a dado from top to bottom, and
what's a data? Hang on there.
Dado.
What's a
D-A-D-O? It's basically there's a dado blade you put in the table saw, and you can cut a slot in a piece of wood to whatever width you really want, and we just cut it to the same width as a piece of 3/4 plywood.
So is that like an early precursor to like what do they call the things where you notch stuff? What's that tool?
You're losing me.
But, a router?
Yeah, router. Thanks.
Yeah.
So is this like an early version of a router?
No, well, it does the same thing, but the nice thing is with a table saw, you can buy the bits to do dados, and it's basically two bits or 2 blades. They're usually 6-inch, and there's a bunch of pieces in the middle, and you just add them to whatever width you want, tighten them up, and it cuts a slot in the wood as deep as you want it to be. So
look at that, 8-inch by 12 tooth carbide, Home Depot, 165 for a dado tool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we had a table saw, and we actually ended up going through 2 table saws, and I think about 3 or 4 jigsaws by the time it was done.
Oh,
but jigsaws,
Yeah.
I mean, I probably kept some of the blade manufacturers in business.
Yeah.
And it's
well, can you move your microphone just a smidge out and a smidge up? A smidge is only a smidge.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can still hear you fine.
Okay.
But I want to know, how did you decide how did you come up with this? Like, what was in your brain? Obviously, like, this is going to be more of a psychological investigation than anything else, more than layout building. Oh, by the way, remember, Kelly, I want to ask him that question if he has any Rapido trains.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
If it's N, if it's H-O, the fast track is Rapido.
Yeah, actually, I sent Jason a picture of one of my Rapido trains.
There you go.
And
Rapido Trains is the official sponsor of the AML Nation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, when they were nice enough to do the Alco FA2s back in 1987, about, I guess 4 of us got together, lost some sanity, and we bought 2 Alco FA2s from the Long Island Railroad, and full size. And these were some of the original ones. The original ones that got out of the Long Island still have the Alco 244s in them. They hadn't been converted to the Cummins or Caterpillars. And we ended up buying the 601 and the 602, both of which were Louisville, Nashville. One was the 309 and one was the 317.
And who exactly is we?
Bob Losey is the main man behind it. Myself, Richard John, 1 or 2. I can't think of some of the other. Bill Gruber, who has since passed away.
Right.
He had a very nice Reading modeler, and I think Richard John was involved in it too. He's with the Anthracite Society. They also bought the 600, which they still have today. So
you guys were just sitting around one day going, "Hey, you know what we need to do is buy a couple of full-size FA2s."
Yeah. Well, actually, we went to buy one, and Bob Losey was the one who went to buy one, and he said, "Okay, well," so we all threw some money in the pot, so to speak, and Bob went up there and he inspected them, and we bid on the 602, and we won that one, but nobody bid on the 601, and the Anthracite Society, they got the I guess it was the 603 is what they got, not the 600, and Bobby, I said, why? He said, well, this thing had been taken out of service. It has a generator issue, which can be extremely expensive to deal with. So he decided just to put a bid in. I think the bid was like, I don't know, $500, $750 or something.
Oh, wow.
And we got it. So we paid $5,000 for one and about $750 for the second one.
Wow.
And so they were delivered down to at that point at the Reading shops in Reading, Pennsylvania, and the Reading Society had they had the Jeep 30 at that point in time. I think about that time they got their C630. The Anthracite had their F3 there, the one they had. It was Bangor and Aroostook, and they had their FA there. We had our 2 FAs there, and started working on. And that was in 1987.
The Reading wasn't still around in 87, was it?
Oh, no, but the Reading Society was still around.
Yeah.
That was the thing. And they had, I don't know if they had leased, but they actually leased part of the shop building. And it was a typical big, you look in the doors, there's rails in the floor, and it went, it was probably 1,000 feet long. And so the idea was, if you wanted to work on things, you could work on them inside, not worry about the weather. And we were there for a while, and they moved from there down to Swedesboro, down where the old Allenwood steel plant. They were there for a number of years. Then we moved them from there over to the Southern Railroad in New Jersey and Winslow Junction. And they were there for a couple of years, and you're doing work on them. And then they went from there down to the Winchester and Western down in Bridgeport, New Jersey. And there, we got the truck swapped. They were completely rewired. Completely, every bit of control wiring has been redone. The 602 is now completely operable. It's in primer. The only thing left to do is actually to finish the cab windows, side windows, because the Long Island took out the original versions and put their own sort of storm door type pieces in. But right now, it's the picture I sent Jason actually was a picture of the model of 602 on the steps of the real 602. So, and it's going to end up being a Pennsylvania Railroad unit. We put a complete, Bob made up a complete set of Pennsy train phone antenna. And so it's got train phones on it. Right now it's at SMS in Bridgeport, New Jersey. And it's moved under its own power. And hopefully within the next year, I hope, it'll get painted.
What's SMS?
It's I can't think. It's basically a switching rail that does for hire switching. There's a Pureland Industrial Park in Bridgeport, New Jersey. They do all the switching in there. They have a bunch of Baldwins. They're a big Baldwin outfit, and they also have an 060 that that's getting ready to be run. So,
can you, Rich? Can you verify any of this?
I've heard it said that the SMS stands for Switching Management Service. I have no idea if that's accurate or not.
That'd be correct.
But yeah, they do operate the rail network in the Pureland Industrial Park in very southern New Jersey near the Delaware River.
Mm-hmm.
They also operate now one of the branch lines of the old Pennsylvania Reading Seashore lines down to Salem.
My head hurts.
So that's how the Rapido. I have 2A units. I have 601 and 602. I also bought an ABA set of Penceys just because.
So the answer to the question: do you have any Rapido trains?
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
What's a Winchester and Western? I worked the Google on the Internet Machine, and it's a railroad that still exists.
Yes, it is. Yeah, basically they handle a good the southern end of what was the CNJ down in very southern New Jersey.
Mm.
So I guess the original one is in Virginia. I think
Winchester, Virginia.
Yeah, Winchester, Virginia. It was basically hauled sand, and that's really what they haul out of New Jersey. That the southern end of New Jersey is basically one giant sand pit.
Yeah.
So, but they had a bunch of mostly Jeeps down there. And
is there any reason to go to New Jersey? Like, is there any reason at all that you'd go to New Jersey?
The shore. Go to the shore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure, there's a reason to go.
Well, next year, if you want to see a nice Pensy FA2 running around, might be the case.
So, why did it keep moving? Why did you keep moving it from spot to spot?
And Reading, basically, I believe it was the Reading company still existed even after Conrail. They owned the building and they decided to sell the building. So we lost that space. And I'm not sure who found it, but even the Anthracite Society stuff, we all moved down to Sweetland, Pennsylvania, which was on the Reading. And that's where the Allenwood steel plant used to be.
Yep.
And so there's nice thing. There was trackage there. There was fences to keep people out, which is always something good with any kind of locomotives. And we were there for a number of years. And then the Inquirer built a brand new printing plant there. And then we had to move because of that. And then we moved from there down to the Southern Railroad in New Jersey. Joe Pataccio owned that. They had two F units. One was painted up like a NYO&W. One was painted up sort of like a Rock Island unit. And they also had a C4, an Lehigh Valley C420, which today is actually up on the Delaware Lackawanna. That's 414. And Richard John from the Anthracite, they were one of the guys that worked on that. So, and the Anthracite group had their stuff down there. It was a safe place to store stuff. That's really what,
Okay. And why did you guys buy them originally? Just for the hell of it kind of thing?
Probably a good general lack of common sense. But the trouble with locomotives is you can't play with them. I mean, it's hey, let's go take the train out for a ride. That doesn't happen. And everything's expensive, extremely expensive. Moving everything is extremely expensive. The idea back then, everybody there were a whole bunch of dinner trains popping up. So the idea back then was, well, we'll build some, we'll have get one operable. The other one, the FA2s really were just cab units. So the cabs still worked. And the prime movers were basically just there to supply 400, I guess it was 408 or 480, to heat and air control, air condition the commuter cars. And So the idea is, oh, we'll do this, and they can, buy some old commuter cars and have a dinner train. And of course, then the insurance industry came in, and a lot of that went down the tubes. So
you bought these originally from the Long Island Railroad?
yes, we did.
Wow, and because they were just upgrading, and they had these, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were buying it. They were buying MP15s to replace the power packs, and also I guess some of the newer cars they had cab cars. So
okay, so I feel like you're dodging the question because I'd really like to know how a guy decides to fill a 3,300 square foot space. How did you come up with this track plan? Like, did you have an original idea of what it was you wanted to model?
Yeah. I knew it was going to be the Buffalo line because I had modeled the Buffalo line at the townhouse.
Right.
That one ran from maybe from Northumberland to Williamsport, which is maybe about 100 miles at most. But I had learned a lot about the line and decided, okay, I'm going to continue with the Buffalo line. And I got more room, so I said, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll make one end of it will be Enola or Harrisburg, which is basically the eastern terminal, so to speak. And I liked helper operations. So I said, I got to have Keating Summit in there, which is the push up. It's a 2.6% grade, which was one of the steeper mainline grades on the PRR at that time.
Well, isn't the Keating Summit the steep? No, Saluda was the steepest grade east of the Mississippi, but wasn't Keating was like right up there as one of the.
Yeah, it's 2.6%. So it was, it was enough that it scared Conrail out of that line. When they had two trains run away, when they let some road formative engines run trains that didn't know what they were doing. So it's, and that's why today, the line today really is the Cedar and, the Northern Central and Lycoming Valley. Conrail only goes, NS only goes so far, really up to Case now, and then goes up to Wilkes-Barre branch, and they have a roundabout way they can get to Buffalo, but that's a roundabout way to do so.
Right, whereas going over the Keating Summit was a direct route.
Yeah.
So you knew you wanted that on the layout.
Yeah. So I sat down and basically I just get sheets of paper and I would just say, well, what if I put the bench rick this way? And okay, I said, well, I need to have a yard here, so it's nice to have a yard that really doesn't have a whole bunch of curves in it because it tends to be operationally an issue sometimes. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to have Northumberland. Okay. And I got to have the Shamokin branch because that's sort of what got me into the Buffalo line and reading articles about that. I said, I got to have that. And then you discover, well, the Reading used to run all the way up to Williamsport, sort of parallel on the other side of the river. Now that would be neat to have. So I need Williamsport. And then, so I just basically sat there and knew the size of the room that I had. Most of I drew the lower deck first because that's wider in most cases, and just I'll go around the wall. Let me put a divider wall here. So I stick a divider wall here and another divider wall over there, and it sort of breaks the railroad up. And one thing I always kept telling myself is about the last year that I was running at the townhouse. It usually took about maybe 7, 8, 9 people to operate the railroad. And it was around the wall. It was actually really a small version of what's upstairs now. And but the aisles were only like 30 inches. And I said, whatever you do, don't give up aisle space. And so when I designed mine, I have most of my aisles are minimum 4 feet. Where a yard is anywhere near, I try and put 6 feet.
Yeah, I noticed that. I mean, that's one of the fun things about the railroad. It's so easy. I mean, we had 30, 40 people there when we came to visit on Tomstock Day, and there was no problem for everybody to walk around and mill around. And I mean, I remember that from before, too.
Yeah. So, so I said, okay. And, I'd say, okay, I'll give up railroad space for aisle space. And because I had, at that time, I had a lot of square footage. And I basically, after it took me maybe 6 weeks, and I had the basic bench work laid out. And, here, this is where Northumberland is going to be. This is where Renovo is going to be. I won't have Emporium, where the helpers are put on was Emporium. I'll use Renovo, and that'll be here. And I'll have Williamsport. Okay, over here I can have a Y here. That would be Lock Haven. It was in a corner, and I could have the branch going off up to the Bald Eagle branch, which went down to Tyrone. And I said, I can do that. And I kept, I said, well, over here at Case, it comes around the corner. The Wilkes-Barre branch used to come off there. Well, I can fit that in the corner, and what am I going to do with that? Oh, I know what. I'll run it down this a grade back behind the yard, and it'll be a lower level. And then I end up with levelitis, I guess you would call it. And I mean, even though I've got with the other addition I built on, there's 3,120 square feet up there. And there's two areas actually. There's 5 levels. And
you built an addition?
Oh yeah, I built an addition in '96. So
when did you build the barn?
1991.
So 5 years. 5 years later, you're building an addition.
Yeah, hindsight should always be 20/20. When I got the first one built, and we were open. We started building the railroad and actually assembling benchwork and putting it in place in February of 1992. And I was still, at that point in time, I just moved up here. And the NMRA convention was in Valley Forge in 1993. And they had visited me at my townhouse, and they said, oh, yeah, we'll put this on one of the layout tours. And I didn't mention to them at all that I was intending to move. And nobody knew about it. And so I said, well, listen, guys, I'd really like to have something running up here, for the tour. And I think it was July of 93. So in February of 92, we started putting the upper level benchwork in. And the nice thing is most of the upper level benchwork, all the lumber, all the plywood was all cut, all machined, it was stacked. So we could assemble 3 or 4 or 5 sections of benchwork a night and install it. We set a laser up that spun in a circle, and that allowed us to set a common height for the benchwork all around the room. And you just set it to where the laser marked. And the upper level benchwork was in 2 weeks. And then, on top of that went the sub road bed, and we wired it. And while that was going on, I'd be upstairs wiring, putting in backdrops, at that point, my control system at that point was the pre-DCC systems. At that point, I had man-made, it was Digipack 64, I think it was called. It was basically one of the old CTC 16 systems that you had up to 64 addresses you could use. One benefit from that was those old systems, when you had any voltage drops, you lose a lot of control. And so when I put the buses in for the main line tracks, they were 10 gauge stranded, and versus most people would use 12. And everything is soldered. So I sort of over-engineered the electrical system, which in the long run has served me well with the addition of sound and multiple locomotives and everything else that runs on it.
So how did you over-engineer it? Just by adding extra wire?
by having 10 gauge bus wire, which had more current capacity.
Okay.
And designing that for an analog control system versus DCC.
Right.
And I was going to use that system until just a couple of months before the convention. And John Mann, I had it wired up. We were about ready to fire it up. And then John Mann was friends with Bernd Lenz. John was German, or actually he might have been Austrian. And he knew Bernd Lenz. And he said, there's a new system coming about that you may want to try. And they're looking for a railroad. They want to have a railroad with it. And I said, what is it? So it's called DCC. And I said, okay, well, what's the difference between what I've got and what it is? And at that time, the original Lenz DCC system was 14 speed steps and 99 addresses. That's all it was. I said, well, that's better than 64. So I ended up getting a Lenz system to install it for the build up to the convention. We got all the upper level bench work in. We got all the lower level bench work in. That's the nice thing about building the kits. It went in fast.
I
had one.
Let me ask
Yeah.
you about these kits. So these kits that you built your bench work in sections in these pre-cut 3/4 ply lumber, the plywood.
Yep.
And then you would take it all up and just build like a section. How did you know what sections you needed based on the plan that you'd drawn?
Every piece of benchwork had a plan.
Oh, okay.
And the plan said to build this piece of benchwork, you need, 2 of these, 4 of these, 3 of these. And you go over to the pile, and all the piles, everything was marked. And you just grab what you needed and build it. Was
that your idea to do that, to build the benchwork?
It was my idea, but also Al Renard, a friend of mine, he said, well, we better have some way to, identify this stuff. So that's what we did. And, the nice thing was a lot of the benchworks, some of them they're 4x8. Like I said, some of them are 3x8. I have a couple peninsulas that stick out. They're all 8 foot across. And the upper level was designed, to be a cantilever. The lower level was just designed with a rounded corner, but they're identical. So, when you got, okay, we're going to build this lower level benchwork that goes at the end of this peninsula, and it's 8 feet wide. And we just built 2 of them, and we had those done, and we built the upper levels and all the, we had, standardized on all rounded corners, and we could just build those and fit them in place. So
you do know that not all this isn't normal, right?
I know it's not normal, but you got to remember, we started building the railroad on the 8th of February, exactly, in 1992. And we had all the bench work in. We had the main line operable, and I had about 6,000 trees on the railroad and some scenery on the railroad for the convention in 93.
Wow.
Wow, that's great.
So, and it was we figured it was about 14, 16 months. I was still working full time. So I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Yeah, because you retired, you said, in 96?
Yeah, well, I retired in 96. So,
right. So you were still in these 1992, you were still working.
Yep.
Right.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. Okay. So you have you noticed, Rich? He dodges a lot of questions.
Well, he's an interesting man. He's got lots to talk about.
Oh, okay. I think he's dodging the questions.
So Ken,
what am I dodging?
I'll get back to it.
so Ken, when did you start in model railroading?
When I was about, let's see, probably about 7 years old, I had American Flyer.
Ooh, yeah.
And I had that for a number of years. And in 1956, my parents, I lived in an apartment, actually over top of our office in the building, or our business, I should say. And then my parents built their first new home in 56, 57. And at that point, a friend of my grandparents was big into American Flyer and wanted to buy my American Flyer. So I sold my American Flyer off. And my dad bought me a Revell train set for Christmas. They had an 060T, Union Pacific, typical, 18-inch radius curves, the Revell station. I have a picture of myself sitting on the floor with it. And I still have, in fact, the engine still exists today, sitting on my case behind me here. But that's what got me into it. And the other thing, too, is my family's business was in Berwyn, alongside the Pennsylvania Railroad's main line between Philadelphia and Harrisburg.
Okay, yeah.
So I grew up, I could look out my bedroom window and see the Berwyn station and, watch trains going by all the time. The business also had a siding. And one of my first jobs was to climb up on top of tank cars and help my dad take a sample and viscosity readings of the product. It was mostly kerosene coming in on tank cars.
Wow.
So I was allowed to climb over trains. So it's
yeah.
What year would that have been?
Probably about 54. I was 6 years old when I had my first official job, so to speak. So, come on.
They still allow that, right, for 6-year-olds to drive it.
Child labor, yeah.
Family business. I mean, I used to ride around with the guys in the trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, What better toys could a kid have?
Well, exactly. It's no different than my dad wanted land, and when I was 12, we moved to the country, and I went to work on the 300-acre dairy farm across the street, and by the time I was 13, I could drive just about anything that was there.
That's true. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It comes in handy.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, you dodged the question about expanding the garage. What happened?
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I built up to 93, we actually started operating the railroad in 94, and it took about 10, 12, 15 people at the most. And I discovered that my helper grade, which I really, wanted to be big time, was far too short. The guys would tie on down at Renova, the helpers would tie on. They'd start up the grade, and in about 2 minutes, they were over the top. And I said, I don't like that. And so I looked and said, well, I could extend the main line. I'll put it back against the wall. I'll change. So I changed that, moved the main line a little bit, and it made it a little bit longer, but it still wasn't long enough. And I said, yeah. I said, and when I built the railroad, the north end of the railroad, we didn't get to Buffalo. You only go as far as a town called Delvin, New York. And it was just a stub. It basically was a single track main line, and it went into an 8-track stub staging. And then in between sessions, you got to back everything out, turn it all around. And I said, this isn't going to work. And I looked around the back of the barn, and I said, well, I could put an addition on the back of the barn here. And so I got some paper, sat down, and I designed a 24 by 32 foot addition. So now the barn's sort of an L. And I said, oh, great. Well, while I'm at it, I'll put a basement underneath this, and I'll move the wood shop into the basement. So that's where the wood shop is now. And so I built a 24 by 32 foot addition. I put another fire door in. So there's 2 fire doors on the second floor. When I built the building, it was interesting because there's no windows in the second floor at all. And the guy said, well, and they said, what is this? I said, and at that point, this was still a working farm. I mean, up behind the house here, I mean, there was still feed corn in, and usually winter wheat or soybeans. I would help the farmers plant stuff. And I said, well, this is a barn machinery shed. And the nice thing is when you tell them that, they go, oh, well, there's no zoning requirements at all on a barn machinery shed. Nothing. And they said, oh. He says, there's no windows up here. I says, well, I don't want any windows. It's a barn. Oh, okay. So when I put fake ones up, it looks like there's sliding doors up there like a typical in a barn, but there's nothing up there. It's completely closed room, but it also keeps the lack of sunlight coming in for
that's right,
which doesn't do things good, and also just another place for leaks and everything else. So
and also
anyway,
when you're up there working at 3 a.m, as far as you're concerned, it's 8 at night.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's funny. We were up when we were building before the big open house in the Anna Murray Convention. I was up there. We had put a bunch of the skyboards up, and we painted them, blue. And then I had these stencils, and I'd be up there with a Krylon spray bomb making clouds. So we had, and there was one door, and we had the door open. We had a fan going. We're up there with masks going. Probably took years off my life. And so I'm up there, and I'm blasting away. Well, evidently one of the local police was driving up the road, and nobody really knew what was going on in that barn. And there's always 4 or 5, maybe 6 cars out there, but there's never any people. And so I'm up there, and one of the guys says, hey, Ken, there's a guy down here who wants to see you. I said, what? So I come down there, right? Well, here's the chief of police standing there. And he says, I have a question for you guys. I said, well, I was driving up the road back here, and there was this door open, and it's all these bright lights. And he says, what's going on up there? And he probably thought it was, like a marijuana farm or who knows what, And I said, oh, come on up. So he comes upstairs, and by that time, the upper level was in, a bunch of us. And he said, is this a model railroad? I said, yeah, it is. He says, can I bring my kids over to see it? So that was after that I said, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's a bunch of guys building a train layout. So it's
what are the actual dimensions of the barn then? With like down the long side of the L, how long is it?
It's inside it's 31 feet, or 79 feet.
Right.
And basically it's a 32 by 80 foot barn, but it's got 6-inch stud walls on it. So it's a 31 by 79 foot barn. And then the other end of the L is actually 23 by 31 foot 6.
So you really have to, because you can't really cram much stuff in there. You don't have much room.
No, not really. No.
It's all aisles.
Yeah, it's all aisles.
If hindsight was 2020, what I should have built was a 40 by 100 foot barn, but I didn't. So that would have been, then I wouldn't have had to do what I did. But
right, go ahead, Rich.
Hey, Ken, I was just curious. So the barn that you built, did that replace a prior barn, or was it?
This had been a dairy farm until the late 1950s, and there was a dairy barn here until that point. Up from, I guess it actually had been a farm probably since the early 1800s. My house was built in 1813, and but there had been a dairy barn here. The barn that was here actually was a 40 by 100. And but it was dismantled. It started to have some structural issues. So at that point, my dad and my grandfather had bought this farm up here as an investment back in the late 50s. And but it was still a working farm until 96. So it wasn't just for investment purposes.
Did you sell part? Did you sell part of the land off, or do you still own the whole?
Yeah, well, the front part, unfortunately, we had to sell off because I would have had to mortgage the rest of the property to pay the taxes.
Right.
It's one of those things where they really sort of force you.
Right.
They sort of force you to get rid of the property.
Okay.
And I mean, I would much rather be able to look out my windows here and see, corn growing or soybeans, or in the wintertime, it was always nice to see winter wheat in the moonlight because it looked just like the surface of the ocean, when it's blowing back and forth.
Right.
And, but I now have toll built, a chunk of homes on one part of it. And I still have 11 acres here at the corner. But I have 206 neighbors now that are fairly far away, but they're there. So
when you were building the garage/barn, did your wife ever kind of just wonder what the hell you were doing?
No, I've never been married.
Oh, you're not married?
I used to tell people, he says, how did you do this? And I said, well, meet the wife and kids. And I said, a lot of people will spend money on their wives and the kids and everything else. I said, I spend money on trains. So it's,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I do remember one of the open houses I had. I usually have open houses November. And there was a husband and wife up here, and the wife was just, she was following around. The husband's asking questions at point and looking at this, and you could tell she had no interest whatsoever, to do with model railroad. And he worked around. He says, "Oh, thank you very much. Oh, this is great. Oh, yeah, I love when I come back. All right, okay." So they're going down the stairs, and so going down the stairs, they get down the stairs. There's like an island, and it goes back down again. And I heard her say, "Now I guess you want a barn, huh?" And I said, I just made that guy's day, didn't I?
You must have operated on other layouts, like when you were in the townhouse. Like, what was your introduction into getting involved with operation and what have you? Like, when did that happen? Like, was that in the late 70s, early 80s? Like, how did you become familiarized with operation, model railroad operation?
Yeah, actually, it was in the late 70s. Around here in November, which is Model Railroad Month, there used to be a list would come out when we used to have hobby shops around, and where people had open houses. And usually it was about 2 pages, and there might have been 6 or 8 layouts on it. And about the same time as that, I found a group close by here, and the neat thing about this group was almost everybody in that group worked for Conrail. Now, Conrail is, main headquarters was in Philadelphia. And so I went to a couple of these Monday night groups, and they operated. So I learned about that. And then the neat thing was I started asking questions about the Buffalo line. Well, I had one good friend that was in the automotive section. Another guy was in the blue room. Another guy was in the grain section. So, and they say, oh, well, here, I'll get you a printout of all the trains that went the Buffalo line yesterday. So it's like, wow, And so that was a start. And then the other thing was actually down in Delaware. There was a good, ended up being a real good friend of mine, was Charlie Carangi. And Charlie modeled the Pennsylvania Railroad. He modeled the corridor from Pot Yard. He had Washington Union Station, Baltimore, up through Perryville, the Y at Perryville, and as far up as Harrisburg. And then another little piece actually went off to Williamsport. And this was pre-DCC, but it was a multi-deck. It was the first multi-deck layout I ever saw. And he had the control system was interesting because he used what was called a stepper. And these were big, giant rotary switches that Bell-Tel used to use in their switching setups for phones. And which meant, they were designed to basically almost take a nuclear hit and still work. And he found a way to get these, and he would wire these things up. You had a walk-around transistor handset that would plug in, and there was a red cab and a green cab and a silver cab. And you go over to this one spot, and you hit this button, and you turn it to the cab you were going to use, and you hit this other button, and the stepper, and your thing would go click, 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 and you watch the lights move around to where you wanted to grab the train, and then you turned it on, and you could run the train, and you could pull the plug out, and the train would continue to run. And there were actually, on the wall, there were actually cab signals. And that was tied into the stepper system, and it actually would tell you if you had a clear block in front of you, or if you had to slow down like an approach, or if you had to stop. And it was amazing because, he had the card system that I use today. That's where I picked that up. He used to run every Sunday night. I mean, every Sunday night, unless it fell on New Year's or Christmas or something else. And then Wednesday night was you go down there and help them reset the railroad and also clean wheels, shop cars, and things like that.
Hey, you know about that, Rich?
Absolutely, sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's what happens on the OC. They have a special night just to clean wheels, and okay. So Dave isn't the only one that's ever done that. So, Rich, you operate. How long have you been operating at Ken's?
For 7 years.
Like regularly?
I would say 3 times a year I make it down there. It's a 2-hour and 20-minute drive from my house.
Okay.
So I certainly do not go every month.
All right.
But when I can.
Okay. And how do you find out when do you send out some sort of email blast or something, Ken, so people know?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Actually, right now, I guess I have 54 people on it. And usually out of the 54 people, I can run with as low as 30 without really annulling much. But usually 32 to 34 people is really about the right size crew.
Wow.
So
is that all?
That's all. Yeah.
But I would say too, Lionel, that Ken runs the first Saturday of every month.
Yeah. Right.
Like you just know that. Like I have my calendar. I have it on my calendar for every Saturday, every first Saturday of the month. Not that I can make it, but I put it on there just to remind myself to try and keep the day clear.
Okay.
The evening.
Right. And because it's a Saturday evening, is it?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes. We start at 6:00 and usually run till 10. It takes about 4 hours.
Really? Only a 4-hour session on such a large railroad. Have you ever thought of making it like longer sessions?
Not at night, because the number of us are all getting older.
Right.
Some people don't like to drive at night now.
Right.
There's a couple other areas here. They'll run from, say, like maybe 1 to 5 or noon to 5 or something, and then usually they'll break for dinner and then they're done.
Right.
But I discovered really with the amount of walking you do upstairs and everything else, with the size of the railroad, 4 hours is about as much as I really want to deal with.
Right.
To be honest with you.
Right, because it's physically taxing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have one of these little Fitbits on my arm here, and I can tell you that a normal, depends on how many hey Kennys there are during an operating session. and there's usually more of those in the first half hour, but it's like, hey Kenny, this doesn't work, or hey Kenny, this, where's this, and I get done the operating session, and I may have started with I said, I had 3,000 steps when I started, and I got 12,000 steps now. So I just walked, about 9,000. I walked like 4.5 miles in my barn and never left it.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so, do you have a regular crew of guys helping you with the railroad now, or do you maintain it pretty much by yourself?
I maintain it. I have some guys that come help me do resets. One guy works up in Buffalo. He'll reset everything in his area. A couple guys will reset the areas they work in, like they're yard masters. They'll take a look at the trains they're going to work there. They'll block the trains to make it easier for them when they do a set out and such like that. But all the maintenance on the railroad is me. So, when something goes bad or needs to be fixed, I'm the one that fixes it. So,
Rich, you've been going for 7 years. You've been there probably 20 operating sessions, let's say, for argument's sake. What's it like?
Sounds about right.
What's it like?
Well, it's big. It is intense in the sense that if you the railroad, the model part of the railroad goes from the Harrisburg area, right, which is a modest-sized city, 90 miles west of Philadelphia, something like that. Giving some geography here for the listeners, and then the route geographically goes north through the state of Pennsylvania and up into the western part of New York State. Well, if you run a train out of Harrisburg and you have a regular run, it literally will take you an hour to get to Buffalo, real time.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you have work in a yard and wait on a meet, now you're up to an hour and a half. Like, it's like no other model railroad I've ever been to because of the scale of it.
Right.
And there are people that have been, I'm sure, operating with Ken for 30 years, and they know their jobs and they know them well. And then there's people like me that are more novices, I guess. But I don't know.
You're far from a novice.
I feel pretty comfortable there. But the thing is, I've been going there for 7 years, but there's parts of his railroad that I've never operated a train on because it's just that big, and it includes that many different branches, and like the whole steel mill railroad, that's a whole separate world that's running next to the Buffalo line. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And as a person who loves operations, I mean, you can't beat it. Just can't beat it.
And do you have a particular job that you enjoy, or?
I'm generally a road crew, right? So when you're a road crew, you're just, there's a bunch of jobs listed on the board. You kind of go down and each person takes the next one. And because of the nature of the design of what Ken is trying to emulate, it's not that all the trains go from the beginning of the railroad to the end. There are these different branch lines that split off and go to places like Altoona and Clearfield and Brookville. And so you'll get to cover many different pieces of the railroad. It's not like you're just bouncing back and forth, and that's fascinating to me. The fact that the Reading, right, the Reading Railroad has two routes on this system. That's a Pennsylvania Railroad prototype. It's fascinating that there are alternate routes, and there's got to be, I'm going to guess, Ken, about a dozen different PRR branch lines of different lengths, right? I mean, everything from the Sealands Grove Industrial Track up to the Bald Eagle branch, right? It's I don't want to use the word complex. It is complex and it is a lot, but that's what makes it interesting. The diversity. It's a diverse railroad. I think that's the word I'm going to stick with.
Well, it'd have to be at that size. I mean, it would have to be diverse.
Yeah.
I don't see how.
So, and
go ahead.
I guess the one other thing I wanted to bring up, Ken, you're using the Pennsylvania Railroad Buffalo line as your baseline, but the reality, just like in the prototype, is the railroad changed over time.
Yes, it has.
And I know your model railroad has done that as well. How many different eras have you emulated over the course of the 30 plus years that you've had the railroad?
Okay. Each one of these lasted probably anywhere from 5 to 7 years. That seems to be my limit of interest, it seems. It's always the Buffalo line. When I first built it, it was the late Pensy, basically 1962 up to 68. I ran that for a while. Then I actually started taking interest in the Penn Central. So I just said, okay, I'm going to model the late Pensy about 67 to 76. So that included all of Penn Central. And I did that for a number of years. About that time, I was also out filming Conrail. And again, with the guys at the Monday Night Group who all work with Conrail, I'd say, hey, what runs on the Buffalo line? And they would give me the train symbols, ENBUs and BUENs. And the other thing was nice is they would also give me the printouts of the trains to show me what traffic was on the line. So I ended up going into Conrail, but it was early Conrail, 76 to 82. 82 is as modern as it really has ever gotten in its life up there. I did that for a number of years. Then Broadway Limited came out with the Pensy M1s, the 482s. And later on, they came out with the I1s. And those are the steam engines that really lived on that line in the mid-50s. So I started collecting them and the equipment that I needed and ended up modeling 56, 57 on the PRR. I had a little bit of Lackawanna up there where the Lackawanna was. I had some Erie where the Erie was. I had the Reading where the Reading was. And Pensy steam. And the helpers, instead of being diesels, were usually a pair of I1s on the back. Any of the trains going to Perfect Heating usually had a pair of I1s on the front. And that ran for 5 or 7 years. And then I went back to the late Pensy, Penn Central. And that was around until last year. And something I always wanted to do, when the V&O articles came out in RMC in the 70s, I was fascinated by that. And I was lucky enough to be able to operate on the V&O, the original V&O, twice. And I saw the later V&O once. I never operated on it. But the freelance idea really stuck in my head. So knowing what history was and knowing what has happened to the Buffalo line since Conrail has gone away, I said, okay, well, what I will do is I will go up till 76 when Conrail came about, but I'm going to introduce a new railroad since the federal government was involved with it and the split up. I said, well, so it's the Northern Central Railway. And the Northern Central Railway was a real railroad. It actually ran from Baltimore as far as Sunbury, up part of the Buffalo line, up until 1914, and the PRR took it over. So it did really exist, but my Northern Central is owned by a corporate structure, which is owned by the steel company, which I own, and Kemac Transportation, which was a trucking company that I owned in real life, and some other things. So we bought the Buffalo line. Conrail has trackage rights over portions of it to get to Buffalo, but not in the direct way. They don't go for heating. And so I've been painting Northern Central equipment. And the Northern Central has a couple of subsidiaries. One of them is the Turtle Point in Allegheny, which is their leasing company for cars. And there's also the, the Mahanoy. Mahanoy. This is getting bad. I can't remember it. Let's see. I actually have the Reading and Northern, but it's my Reading and Northern, not Andy Mower's. That took over the Reading end of it. Yeah. So that was when I sort of figured, the Reading went bankrupt in 71 after Penn Central went bankrupt in middle 70. So my idea was the Reading wanted to sell off north of Belt, which is what Andy today now runs. So I said, well, okay, my company bought it. We had the Reading and Northern. So, but I stole some from Andy's, but, the Shamokin and Mahanoy, I have the Cumberland Valley, which is a section of the line that used to run from Harrisburg down towards Hagerstown in the real world. So, but they all have a common paint scheme, sort of like the Genesee in Wyoming does. Sometimes there's different colors, but the paint scheme is basically, the scheme itself is basically the same. So I sort of figured out, I said, well, I mean, I'll be 75 this year. And I said, well, if I'm ever going to do this, I better do it now or forget about it. So I did it. So
That's great. I mean, if I counted correctly, that means there's been 6 different eras
yes,
on your railroad. And I think that's it's great efficiency in terms of getting, I don't hate to use the word play value out of it, right? But, you know, the same basic infrastructure with the investment in different rolling stock, or at least locomotives, has given you just this huge palette of different experiences. That's really cool.
Yeah. The only thing I had to change really was locomotives, cars, and automobiles and trucks. The customer base on the railroad was based on a CT 1000 from the Pensy in 45, some of which still existed, up until modern times, but most of which were gone. But at least at one point in time, they were really there. So that's pretty much stayed the same. So. It's obviously, as I tell people, they go upstairs, they walk upstairs, they look around, and their jaw's on the floor. It's always funny to watch. And usually the wife will say, "You're not married, are you?" And I go, "No, I'm not." And they go, "Oh, okay, that explains some of these things." And I usually tell them, I said, this is what happens when it's obviously more than a hobby. So it's.
Is it more than a hobby for you, or is it?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'll tell you, when COVID hit, and I shut down operations for about 18 months, it actually gave me what I decided to do. I said, well, some of the scenery on this railroad is 25 years old. So you go into one area and say, well, I'm going to clean this up and freshen this up. Well, you freshen it up, you stand back and you look at it, and it looks like a brand new car sitting next to one that's like 50 years old. Right. And I said, what? I'll just keep going. So I kept going. So the next thing you know, I'm ripping up some old scenery. I'm repairing this. I'm fixing grade crossings. I'm out there rebuilding telephone poles that lost half of their cross arms on them. Decided to redo some industries, put signs up, all these things that I never had. Before it was the sessions always sort of got in the way. And now it's like, well, I'm not going to have an operating session until all this craziness is over. So I might as well get this stuff done. And, I even built another addition, so to speak, not really addition on the building, but, I've been at the Chuck Hitchcock's a number of times out in Kansas City. And I saw a number of years ago, he was selling off some of the bits and pieces of his, the industrial railroad that he built, the Kansas City Industrial Railroad. And one of the things he was selling off was Elevator A, which was a Santa Fe elevator. It was in Kansas City. And I looked and I said, so I sent him I said, do you still have that? And he says, yeah. I says, I'll buy it. And the price was right. I mean, it was all done, And I said, okay. So I sent him a check and I said, what are you going to do? He said, well, I was going to go out to the convention in Kansas City. Right. And when out there, I'll pick it up while I'm out there. Right. Well, that was the Kansas City convention that was canceled.
Right.
So I'm going, okay. And so it's out there. And he had moved. It was at one of the operators' houses. And I said, all right. I said, well, I'm just going to go get that thing. So I call the guy up. And I said, listen, I'm going to head out there. I'll let you know when I'm close. I'm going to pick it up. So I left here on a Sunday, being a night person. I left here at Sunday night about midnight and got on the turnpike and headed west, right? Monday at 6 p.m. in the evening, I rolled into the guy's house at Kansas City and knocked on his door, and he went, oh, you're here already? I said, yeah. Did you stop? I said, no, I didn't. We loaded the Elevator A into the back of my Tahoe. He said, what are you going to do now? I says, well, I'm just going to head east until I get tired, and I'll stop and pull over. So I stopped, and I now can tell you where Boonville, Missouri is. I stopped there twice, and middle of nowhere, literally. But I got back here on Tuesday night, with a round trip to Kansas City. And I had this idea, well, I'm going to redo the Center Peninsula, and I'll put this grain elevator over here. And then I decided, no, I don't want to redo this peninsula. And I go, well, no, I'm going to do this grain elevator. And one of my operators his name's Paul Rice, and he actually works for Amtrak. And he said, what are you going to do? He said, I don't know. I said, I was going to put it here, but I'm not going to do this now. And he says, how big's that area over top of the stairs? And I went like, So I get downstairs, I get tape measure, right? And I build another piece of benchwork that sits on top of the stairwell. And there's an opening, where you just walk up the stairs and you're looking up and there's all this white benchwork. I painted it nice, put lights underneath. And then I put a removable bridge that comes out of Mineral Spring Yard in Buffalo. And it's actually, it's Burroughs Lot Yard, which was a real yard, a grain facility yard in Buffalo. So Elevator A is now in Buffalo. And I renamed it and I called it Hitchcock Grain. So, but that was the last piece of benchwork that I've built, major piece. I've also put in a storage area for extra traffic underneath the railroad, which required a third helix. But that's just it's not really being used. It doesn't get used during operating sessions. It's basically a way to put trains, that you only run once in a while or whatever. It's a way to get traffic off the railroad for long periods of times without them just showing up again.
Dave Abeles would call that deep staging.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I have a total of 15 tracks down there, and each one can hold a 40-car train. So, I mean, I can literally have 600 cars down there, off on the railroad, but off the railroad. So
how do we answer the question? It's more than a hobby to you. Is it like? Well, is it a life? Is it a lifestyle? Why do you say that? Like it's
the amount of time. I mean, the fact that I build a barn, I build a building for the model railroad.
Right.
There's no trains in my house. I think there's a couple station pictures, but that's about it.
Okay.
But 90% of the time I'm out here. I'm sitting here right now. I'm in my shop area, and that's where, I'm not in the house. I'm mostly out in the barn.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. And it's just, okay. So I've been asking this guys, Rich.
Yes.
And Kelly.
Yep.
I think we may have stumbled onto the perfect guy to ask this question to.
Ooh.
Okay. Shoot.
Before I ask that question, can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
Could we do this again, like in a couple of weeks?
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we haven't even scratched the surface here, buddy.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about his cab down in the garage there.
Well, we haven't talked about a lot of things. We haven't talked about the different levels. There's a million things we haven't talked about.
Steel mills.
Steel
Oh,
mills.
man.
We got to get Seth on here for that. He's a steel mill guy.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot. So now you talked about the guy that owns the Reading and Northern, like on a first name basis. Do you know him?
No, I've never met Andy. I know of him. That's about it.
Okay. So, all right.
But yeah.
So what is it about this hobby? I'm starting to realize doing the podcast. Now I know you've probably listened to all of the podcasts and some of them twice.
Mm-hmm. I've listened to some. I don't know about twice.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Cool. How did I sound?
Good.
Oh, okay. Good. All right.
Legible.
So what is it about? Because this hobby, what I've started to realize has become my mandate is to find out what it is about this hobby that fascinates people. Because it seems like for me, I've been in it since I was 5 or 6, whatever the age was. And it never leaves. Like it's like once it's in your blood, you cannot get it out. And the people that are in the hobby are passionate about the hobby. So, what do you think it is? I mean, you spent half your life almost.
Probably more than that.
Yeah. You've spent a great deal of time enjoying this hobby to a level that only most people can dream about. Like, what do you think it is about model railroading that is so, dynamic or draws people to it so much?
I think just building things with your hands, and seeing a result from it. as you know, I mean, I don't do a whole bunch of scratch building. I do mostly kit bashing. Now, I did scratch build, two blast furnaces and a BOF and such, but I use bits and pieces of kits in certain places. And I don't. It's just the thing I find interesting is I mean, I look at too as sort of the customer side of the thing on the model railroad is that, it's like, okay, I in my Buffalo, there's a Ford stamping plant, which I have, and Harrison Radiator had a plant. So it's like, okay, well, and lucky that the friend of mine that worked for Conrail says, well, everything, the Ford plant was served by these railroads. So there's a pool of these cars, and they're all, they're 86 footers, they're Ford cars. So they're 4-door cars. Now Harrison, they had 50 footers and 60 footers. And it's just, it's finding out the cut. And it's okay, well, now I need to go get these cars. And if you find something that's close, and then I paint stuff, I paint booths, your decal and your flat finishing, you bit by bit, you find out little chunks of information about where you're modeling, and say, oh, that's cool. Oh, that explains why that car's here. Things like that. It's history. That's another piece of it. It's just the history of the line, and what used to be. And in most cases, that's really what it is. It's I mean, I'd say I've owned some real rare locomotives. I've had a track speeder for a number of years. I had 2 high rail trucks. I had 2 Suburbans, one of them ex-Conrail, and I restored it. I mean, I used to say I work with vehicles, so I restored it in my shop. Had to rebuilt the rail gear, and I joined NARCOA, which is the North American Rail Cars Owners Association. And the neat thing was I got to run a lot of the branches that I model upstairs. I ran from Sunbury, all the way up to Shamokin and passed it on the Penn and Reading lines. I've run from Williamsport Yard all the way down to Montgomery. I've run from Williamsport Yard all the way out to Avis Yard. I've run on the ex-Lackawanna line north out of Northumberland. And, so it's the history that goes with it too. So, it's like, and yet there's other people interested in it today with the videos. I got an unbelievable library sitting over here. Morning Sun books. I probably keep them in business, and it's just, I guess it's like a quest. I know what I want to model, but you're trying to find information, and you find a little piece here, a little piece here, a little piece there, a little piece here, and you put it together, and it probably doesn't mean much to anybody else, but it does mean something to me.
Yeah.
So
it's something about seeing the trains move on something you've built.
Yeah. I mean, there's times when I said after the first 30 minutes is usually when the Hay Kennys show up, and then after that, but I can walk around, and it's sort of neat to sit there and watch the stuff that you came up with, and I came up with in my head happening. You're sitting there watching a train that's going up over Keating with a pair of helpers on the back, and here comes one down Keating, and you look, okay, well, there's the W2 coming out of Erie, and he's waiting at Rice for these guys to clear. And I turn around over here, and there's the branch, there's a guy working the branch at Selinsgrove at the Pennsylvania Power and Light Plant. And it's like, this is all stuff that came out of my head, real stuff. But, and there's 25, 30 guys here having a good time playing with trains.
Ken, if I could just jump in, I just want to say, the guys that are your regular helper engineers are really amazing, because that's all they do for 4 hours is push trains over Keating Summit. And they're so good at it that, those of us that are not quite as experienced running the train, they're like, look, you guys just move the train, keep it steady, and they adjust based on the slack and the couplers. But I mean, the helper district is real. You won't make it with a big train if you don't have helpers. Yeah. And I'm really impressed with their abilities and making that go, and with their, I'll say, interest to want to do that all night long.
Yeah. I mean, the helper crews. I mean, that's I tell you, I said, when you're going, when helper crews attached to your train, the helper crew's in charge of the train. Yeah. Right. And he'll tell you what to do or what not to do. So, And, like I said, there's probably 3 or 4 guys I have that are in the helper pool. And some other guys, well, can I run helpers? And I go like, and I've watched run a regular train. I go like, no, I don't think so. Because then you'll discover about, either string lining or compression. And and you don't need either of them, because then you're up there on a step ladder trying to put a train back on. Yeah, that's in the bushes.
So I got other questions. I'm going to save them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to save them. Are you okay, Rich, doing this again?
Absolutely.
Are you okay, Kelly, doing it again?
Oh, it's just it's fascinating. Like I said before, when I first saw it, I was blown away. And the third time I've seen this layout, it was to the point where there was so much there I couldn't take it all in.
No.
The change from the first time.
Right.
I mean, it's just amazing. And now he's had two high rails, and
I did, yeah. I've gotten out of that portion of the hobby. I mean, I had them.
The fact that you were in it, you're just it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, the first one I had was an '84 Suburban. It was an ex-Conrail Suburban. Actually, Ed Sikora, who was Altoona Division superintendent, it was his truck, and I bought it and restored it, and it was the B7120X was his actual official Conrail number. And I'd be out there running this thing, and when guy walked up, he said, "You know Ed Sikora?" I go, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, that was his truck." I says, "I know that, but I never met the man." So,
wow.
So, Kelly, can you answer the question?
Yeah, I definitely will be available.
Okay.
There's no I'll hell or high water. I will be there.
How about 2 weeks tonight? Are we all available 2 weeks tonight?
Yeah, that should be good.
All right.
Let me do my.
Kelly's got to look at his schedule. He's a very busy man. He's
that'd be the 24th.
Possibly.
Yeah.
2 weeks from tonight. Just leave it at that.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
I'll
Thanks,
talk to you later. I'll talk to you. Or I'll make a sacrifice. I'll definitely. You know what? I'm going to make a sacrifice. I will be there.
All right. Ken, on their next show, I'll try to have an experienced crew here for you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot.
By the way, if I go on and on and on too much, just tell me to stop.
I will.
No.
We'll tell you to shut up and stop talking.
Okay.
Oh, man.
You're spewing out. What's the deal with this? So then December 2022, there was a cover shot article about your railroad written by Phil Manette.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal with that guy?
Phil, well, he's been an operator here for a number of years. He was big in the OPSIG group.
Yeah.
And he has. I've never seen his rarity. He lives up, I think it's in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Bronx, in the Bronx.
Or the Bronx. Yeah. Okay, Bronx. And when he comes down here, he rides a motorcycle. How's that?
Yeah, I know.
And even in the rain.
But the first time, or the only time he was ever on the podcast, like we weren't 2 minutes in, and he said podcasts are stupid.
Oh. Okay.
So I'm going to get him back on just to bug him.
Oh, okay.
So does he behave himself when he's there?
Oh yeah. In fact, he's my Williamsport yardmaster. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So how far of your regular guys that make 80% of the sessions? What's the farthest somebody comes from?
Jamie Robinson and Steve Belsori. Jamie Robinson comes down from Maine.
He's a regular?
Wow.
Well, pretty much. He comes down. I guess he picks up Steve, and they stay they come down, run the session. When we still had an Uno's Pizza around here that was open, they're all gone now. After the session was stopped, we go down to Uno's and have some pizza and beer or whatever else. And they stay the evening, and then they head home the next day.
Okay.
So, and I have a bunch of guys that come from Harrisburg area, which is about 100 miles away. We'll have 1 or 2 guys from Williamsport. That's probably about 3 hours away. So,
Rich, why are you only going 2 or 3 times a year? What's the problem?
Busy man.
What's the problem, Rich?
Lots to do.
So, Kelly, you'll be interested in this.
Yes.
Seeing as how I'm always beating you to death, anyways.
I'm used to it.
And everybody likes to know what we're doing all the time. So I'm talking to. I wanted to talk to Rich about his latest trip out to working on the Cumbers and Toltec.
Toltec, yeah.
Right. And so I said to him, "Hey, we should." So I said, "Hey, let's do a thing." And he says, "Most weeknights work. When were you thinking?" Then he gives me a list of only 3 weeknights over the next 2 weeks that he was available. And the very first text before that, most weeknights work. Wait a minute, I only got 3 over the next 2 weeks. I'm like, what is it? Most weeknights work, or you're just too busy to fit me into the schedule?
Yeah. Well, this week, of course, we had already planned this, and then coming up Wednesday and Thursday, I'm trying to hold that free because it's Manhattan Henge, which is the phenomenon that occurs a couple times a year where the sun sets directly in line with all the cross streets in Manhattan. And so if you set up on one of the wider streets like 42nd Street or 34th Street, you can get a really neat photo looking west down those wide streets, and the ball of the sun just before it sets exactly fits between the buildings.
Wow.
It's just kind of a neat local thing that, the weather is always iffy. So I try to block it out on the chance that the weather's good so I can get those. So that's why I gave you some dates.
So most weeknights aren't good then.
This week.
Ken, this is really cool, buddy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and everything. And
no problem.
And it's a lot of fun, and there's still like a million questions. I think before the next one, I'm going to put out on the Facebook page for people that have questions. They can ask them.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But I've still got a million questions. Like one is I want to talk to you about your motivation to keep working on it, but not right now.
Yeah.
And the different eras, collecting the equipment and painting the equipment. Like, holy mackerel, that must be a staggering job as well.
Yeah, it is.
But so just so we're clear, you do have plenty of Rapido trains.
Yes, I do.
Rapido trains your fast track to model railroading fun. Oh God, I love it.
So we have we actually have jingles and everything.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just tell Rapido if they happen to do any FA1s in Long Island.
Oh.
We own a couple other. We bought some FA. Bob Lucy actually bought some FA1s when they were getting rid of the last batch. So we have 2 SP&S units. They were the Long Island 611 and 614. So we ended up with a bunch of locomotives. So
where are they?
Those are actually down at Millville, New Jersey, on the Winchester and Western. But actually, one of the other FA2 and one of the RS11s we've owned is going to be brought up to SMS so we can do a truck swap and such. So Bob bought 2 RS. We have 2 RS11s that the Erie Mining used to have. We bought 2 of the British Columbia remote control radio cars. One's an FB1, one's an FPB2. We also have a VIA FPB4, which is had completely rebuilt, and then the prime mover had an issue, so it has completely rebuilt trucks, but has no prime mover or main generator in it. So we have a bunch of stuff. So it's
jeez.
Bob Losey's really the one in charge of that, though, not me. I pay more attention to what's upstairs here.
So what does he do? Come along and say we need a new new prime mover for locomotive such and such, and give me $2,000?
No. He bought the 2 RS11s from Erie Mining, and they have 251s in them, and they redid. I know they've redone one of the FA1s because the engine mount on the 251 is different than a 244 Alco.
How many locomotives do you have altogether?
2 FA2s, an FB1, 2 FA1s, an FPB2, an FPB4, 2 RS11s, and a Penske N5 caboose.
Okay, so not as many as not that many.
Oh no, no. The RS11s are going to basically be parts pieces for the 2 FA1s, and then they'll be parted out once they're done. And then the same with the V unit, we bought that for the trucks. So
do you actually have a legitimate chance of finishing one of these locomotives?
Oh yeah, well the 602, like I said, it has moved under its own power. It's completely rewired. It's got 26 brake in it. The only thing, we're doing some minor cosmetics to it. It's on primer. Train phones are on it. Hopefully it'll be painted either SMS build a paint shop to do some of their stuff. So I'm hoping that maybe this year it might show up. It'll come out as the Pennsy. It'll be the 9609, and the 09 is just to let people know that it was the O&N 309, and so whether the 601 would be the next one out. The idea was to build an ABA set of FA2s and an ABA set of FA1s. That was the original idea. So,
Rich, you know what you and Dave should do?
All ears.
You go out and buy a couple of locomotives.
No, don't.
I don't even own any model locomotives, much less real ones.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you're just the ultimate operator. You're the ultimate model railroad operator. Oh man, is there any place on the internet to see a track plan of your layout?
Actually, the latest and greatest best one is the one that Phil Monet did in RMC. That was that's the best one probably.
Do you have a Facebook page for your layout?
I did one years ago, but I haven't done anything with it. So
well, all you got to do is take your camera. You know how to take a picture with your phone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I can do. Sometimes me getting it on the Facebook page is I'm not a computer literate individual.
No, but you're computer literate enough to turn it on, and that's about the most ability you need to work Facebook. Mm-hmm. People would love to see, once a week a picture of something you're working on the layout.
Yeah, I could do that. I mean, I got a bunch of pictures on my phone, so I could probably find a way to transfer some of them over.
Well, you just load the Facebook app onto your phone. Rich, next time you're there, show him how to put that Facebook on his phone.
Okay.
That'll be your job. That'll be your job, buddy. we gotta get Ken out to the world so people can easily find the stuff other than just in the magazines. And we haven't even come close to investigating. Well, there's a million things we haven't.
Oh yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. And the best part about this, Ken, is you and I didn't really know each other. I mean, we knew of each other, but we didn't know each other. And then when we came over for the, this is going to sound really rude or crude, but we're kind of used to that here, aren't we, Rich and Kelly?
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. No,
we're transparent, but not necessarily accurate. Right?
Yeah, we're no accurate. It's not. This isn't going to be rude. It's not rude. Rude is the wrong word. This until I came on with the Tomstock crowd and we did the tour of your place, I'd never really had a chance to chat with you, and you and I had a great 10 or 15-minute chat there. And I'm walking away thinking I got to get this guy on the podcast because you're a very personable gentleman, and. And you are. You speak up, and you're a very personable gentleman. And people need to know that not only is Ken got this spectacular layout, but he's also a good guy, a nice guy to know, and a fun guy to hang around with. So that's kind of that's an important aspect of a model railroad.
Oh yeah, yep, yeah.
It's a very social hobby, right? And when you need 34 people or whatever the number is, run your layout, right? That social aspect is a big part of it.
Yeah, we got to talk to Ken about the social. I'm writing that down right now. I'm writing social aspect. I'm making.
And I always have everybody around here knows you. Oh, you're the guy with the trains.
Well, sure.
Yeah. But I always tell people, is there any way we can come? I said, sure. I said, a lot of people know about it. They want to see it.
Yeah.
It's when I was a kid, there was somebody in my parents' neighborhood. So, one down there around the other side of the street. And I was told, this guy is an unbelievable model railroad, right? Well, I was too shy to go knocking on the guy's front door to say, hi, can I see your trains? Never did that. And I sort of told myself, something, if I end up with something that's half decent and people want to see it, I'm gonna let them see it. So that's what I do.
That's awesome. So, don't you think this hobby's way bigger than people realize?
Oh, I think it is. So it's
yeah. Ken, you and I are going to be best buddies going forward. whether you want to or not.
Once you're in, you can't leave.
Yeah.
You're a stalker.
Once you get sucked into the AML nation, you're in for good.
Hey, Lionel, I'm thinking of maybe a special trip when we go to Tom Stock birthday party.
Yeah. Maybe we can figure out a way that we can go and see Ken's layout again.
Yeah, before or after.
Yeah, we at least got, but Jerry Britton's is number one.
Yeah, it's priority. Yeah, it's priority.
That's priority. All right. Kelly, can you give out our email address?
Yes. If you want to reach us through the wonders of email, you can reach us at modeler'slife@gmail.com. That's modeler with one L like Enola, not two L's like Buffalo Line.
Nice.
I was trying to get Lionville in there, but it just wouldn't fit.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. And if you didn't catch that email address, if you go to our website, modeler'slife.com, and click on a picture of the moderately agitated mailboy in a particularly agitated state, boom, the address comes up already, and all you get to do is fill in your subject and your text, and we'll get your email. And Ken, I have a really good question for you.
Sure.
Have you ever wanted a T-shirt with a hot dog on it?
Let me think. It's a possibility. How's that?
Okay. Well, if you go to Midwest Model Railroad, where do you buy most of your railroad supplies? No, don't answer that question. I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
Okay.
I'm writing that one down.
Okay.
So if you go to Midwest Model Railroad, and their URL is midwestmodelrr.com, and you scroll across the navigation bar to Other, and the drop-down menu comes AML Nation. In there, you will find a wonderland of AML merchandise, hats, hoodies, T-shirts, mugs, and in there you'll find a T-shirt with a hot dog on it.
Oh, okay. All right. I will take a look.
Yeah, take a look. Can I come run your railroad sometime? Can I be part of the operating session sometime?
Yeah, no problem.
Are you sure? Well, you better check with Rich first.
Yeah.
I think Lionel would be fine. I think you should assign him to work with Steve Mallory.
Yeah. Well, I put you with Rich.
There you go. Me and Rich running a train.
Is that okay, fine. Rich?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So and everybody, one last time, Kelly, don't forget to you have lots of Rapido trains.
Yes, Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
If it's N, if it's HO, the fast track is Rapido.
Yeah, you love Rapido trains.
I do.
What was I going to say? I was going to say something. Oh, yeah. This is on the free channel, so if anybody, if you enjoy this kind of podcast, and who wouldn't, it's free every Monday, but on Tuesdays, for just a few cents a day, you can have twice as much podcasting every week, because on Tuesday is our paid subscription channel. If you go onto our website and click on Patreon, you'll find out all about it. And over there, we're a little bit more relaxed. Rich, how would you describe the Patreon channel?
It's a real smorgasbord of entertainment.
There you go. Model railroad entertainment.
Yeah, the Antics channel.
It's model railroad based.
Model railroad based entertainment. Exactly. Yeah. But when you're Rich, you operate all sorts of different layouts. When you go to operate somebody's layout, you don't strictly talk model railroading the entire time.
That's correct.
Yeah. So it's the podcast is all about model railroading. It's like being at a club. You know, half the time you're talking trains, and half the time you're talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins and how they stole the general manager from the Toronto Maple Leafs, but we didn't want him anyways. Pooey. Do I seem bitter? Okay, Ken. Now the last thing you have to do is you have to say "Happy Rails" to you.
Happy rails to you.
Yeah, not yet.
test.
All right. This is a test.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's explanation. It's like operating the layout. There's things that have to be done before. So at the appropriate moment, you have to say happy rails to you. Now the key is there's no singing, there's no dancing, there's no kind of interpretation. You just say happy rails to you with enthusiasm.
All right.
All right. Well, Ken, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
happy rails to you.
I like the first one better. It was more enthusiastic. Yeah, the first one was way more enthusiastic.
Happy rails to you.
While in Busted Knuckle, guests of A Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.